When I was growing up, I read a lot of biographies and autobiographies. You know, I was fascinated by a lot of historical figures. The computer field was quite young, but already there were people like Ken Olsen, Gordon Bell, who'd done incredible work.
I think we've got a wonderful story. The evolution of computing has been a great thing, and I happen to believe that the computer is the greatest invention ever.
I like the history. Even before my time, machines that I had barely heard of, actually going and seeing what they look like, physical sizes, and looking at some of the nomenclature on the switches and thinking about the people that used them.
The semiconductor industry has made bigger changes in a few decades than printing has over a few centuries.
When I was a student at MIT, we all shared a computer. It took up half a building. It's an IBM 7094. Maybe it's here. It costs tens of millions of dollars. The computer in your cell phone today is 1,000,000 times cheaper and 1,000 times more powerful.
We are recording the events of history contemporaneously with them happening. Rarely in history do you have a chance to do that. Wouldn't you love to be able to hear Michelangelo talk about what it was like to paint the Sistine Chapel?
This is a remarkable place, and I support the heck out of it. I really think it's an important thing.
That's what a museum is about, is being able to understand the history of what's been happening and to see it and feel it.
When I was a graduate student and I was complaining about the borough's architecture, my faculty member told me, study it. Even if you don't like it, there's something exceptional in there that got it to be successful. You need to know what that is. That's what the Computer History Museum is all about.
Thank you. Thank you all. On behalf of the trustees and the staff and the volunteers of the Computer History Museum, I want to welcome you to the 25th anniversary year of our Fellows Awards. The first award, as you may know, was given to Grace Murray Hopper. That was back in 1987 at the Computer Museum in Boston, which was our predecessor institution. And then there was a hiatus for a few years. Talk to me later and I'll give you the inside story. But the next award was in 1995. That was the year when we established this outpost, the West Coast outpost of the museum, as the Computer Museum History Center. And since then, there have been awards roughly on a yearly basis. And after tonight, we will have inducted a total of 61 fellows in what is now the Computer History Museum. I'd also like to thank Trustee Ike Nassy for again running the fellows selection process. It seems to be a lifetime job for Ike, which is okay with me because he's doing a wonderful job. I'd also like to acknowledge the help of Cynthia Holliday and Chris Loosely of Upright Marketing for managing the whole process. And of course, the expertise of our only slightly anonymous jury that tries to select each year the next generation of fellows. We do accept public nominations, so if you're interested in proposing someone for next year's fellows, watch the website for an announcement of the process for doing that. We acknowledge today also the loss of a fellow, John McCarthy, at the age of 84. John was a towering figure in artificial intelligence, computer and human reasoning, programming languages, time sharing, and I'll bet many of you didn't know this, space travel. Honest, look it up. I first met John in 1970 when I was a beginning graduate student at Stanford taking CS206, which was nominally symbolic processing with Lisp. But it quickly became clear that you were supposed to learn Lisp on your own. He wasn't going to teach you that. And what the course really was about John extemporizing on topics like epistemology, knowledge representation, programs with common sense, human reasoning, politics, and mountain climbing. He was an amazing man. We were honored to have John here at the Fellows Award dinner last year, and we miss him. We celebrate Computer Museum Fellows because the computer is a big deal. It's not just a big deal for the people in the industry, it's a big deal for civilization. And every once in a while I look at the lists that people compile of the top 10 inventions just to make sure that we're getting the respect that we deserve. So I have here a couple of lists that I took off the website just recently. One is called shareranks.com, and their list of 10 starts with electricity. Okay, already we have a problem, because as far as I'm concerned, electricity is not an invention, it's a discovery. But, okay, then they move on to things like the wheel, the telephone, antibiotics, and there we are, number 5 on the list, computers. Great. Number 6 on the list is the internet. We have a double whammy, so we're there twice. And then the printing press, language, human language in general, the light bulb. My favorite, of course, is the last item on the list, which is duct tape. Now, you may laugh, but in our household, duct tape is a very important invention. The other list is called top10s.net, and it starts off with language, goes to cooking, then to tools, which I think is a bad choice, because tools are just too generic. After all, a computer is a tool, too. And then plumbing, by which I think they mean indoor plumbing, and specifically the toilet. The printing press, anesthetic, antibiotics, birth control. Where's the computer? Okay, number 9 on the list is the internet. So finally, we're there on the list. And I guess to many people these days, the internet and the computer are the same. The network is the computer, remember that? So we're on there at least. The number 10 on the list is alcohol. So enjoy your wine tonight. It's one of the great inventions of the world. Well, what's the conclusion from all of this? Well, one conclusion is we shouldn't be too complacent, because after all, we're on the list with duct tape and the toilet. But we are on the list, and we're becoming ubiquitous. Computers are everywhere. They're in everything. We expect our cars and our refrigerators to be smart. A camera with analog film that needs developing is weird, is rare now. Cameras are computers. In a couple of decades, having a pen that doesn't record what it is you write will be viewed as quaint. Right? The computer is changing our expectation of what inanimate objects are and do. The world will never again be the same because of this invention, and the people who have made it happen and are making it happen are the people who we induct as fellows. So thank you for being here to take part in the celebration of their accomplishments. This is a wonderful time in the 34-year history of the museum. I hope you've all had a chance to see the Revolution exhibit downstairs. If not, definitely stay after the event to see it. It's, in my opinion, spectacular. So the museum is doing well, and we are also fortunate to have a remarkable chief executive who is paving the way for an equally remarkable future for the museum. It's my pleasure now to invite up our CEO, the dynamic and energetic John Holler.
Lynn, thank you so much. It's so great to be with all of you here tonight. That was a fantastic set of remarks. Lynn is an amazing chairman. I've never followed duct tape and toilets before, but I think that's probably not a bad thing because your expectations have been lowered substantially. This is traditionally one of the most sparkling evenings of the year at the museum, and if you look around you tonight and I look out at you, I can say, you are definitely sparkling tonight. So thank you for being here and for looking so great. 25 years is a long time to do anything, yet even as we mark a quarter century of fellows, I'm struck by the fact that we've hardly scratched the surface in the work to be done. One of our honorees tonight is Ed Feigenbaum, who's also a trustee of the museum, and Ed said to me once, the nice thing about the museum is it not only collects things, but it also collects people. And I suppose that at the end of the day is partly what Fellows is all about. It's collecting and bringing together a remarkable group of people who've really changed the world. And so I want to add my own personal welcome to all of you who have returned tonight and also all of you who are here tonight to be inducted. All 61 of our fellows have changed the world for better, Our job is to preserve that and to use those stories to inspire future generations. And that makes it fun for all of us to come to work every morning. And for that reason, we're looking forward to the next 25 years of Fellows. It represents tonight the hard work of a group of people. Lynn has acknowledged many of them, and I'd like to add my thanks to a few. Our sponsors tonight are a big reason why Fellows does happen on such a sparkling scale. ARM has every right to be proud and to be one of our major sponsors tonight, honoring Steve Ferber and Sophie Wilson. Thank you very much to ARM. The Financial Times, for the first time this year, is our global media sponsor. You'll be reading about the museum in the Financial Times in the days and weeks to come. We're delighted to have the FT here. And a large number of other sponsors that you see on the screens and in your programs. You go a long way to making this evening possible and to making it successful, and we're so delighted to have you participate tonight. There are two people who work extremely hard to make this room look the way it does and make the lobby look the way it does and have the food be as amazing as it's going to be when you eat it tonight. Karina Sweet, who is the overall producer of the Fellows program, and Valerie Alston, who designs the evening from start to finish. And I want to be sure and give them the recognition they deserve tonight. And also John Plute, who has produced the media that you're going to see tonight and has been our staging director. Finally, most of all, thank you to our class of 2012. Ed, Sophie, Steve, Corby, congratulations. We'll hear much more about you later this evening. We feel it's a great privilege to honor you tonight. Your work reminds us that history is important not only because of what you stand for and what your work stands for, but because it helps all of us to glimpse the implications of computing and the internet and all the things that Lynn talked about for the future. You and the larger circle of Fellows help us and inspire us and bring us back to work every day, and I thank you for that. We'll hear more about you as the evening progresses. Now it's simply my job to say, enjoy the rest of the evening, and the program will resume in a bit. Thank you, everyone. Three quick things, and then we're going to get on to our program. First of all, I want to say a very special thank you to two organizations that made a tremendous contribution to the Fellow Awards this year. If you see these beautiful programs that are on your table, the design of these programs, the design of the banners downstairs that you're seeing, the design of the logo slides, all done for us by 1185 Design, which is run by one of our amazing trustees, Peggy Burke, who's here tonight. Thank you very much, Peggy, and the 1185 team. Second, this magazine was just published today. In fact, if you take it off the middle of your table, you can probably still sort of understand that it was published today. This is our core magazine, which is all about the Fellows. So if you've been watching the slideshow over the last hour or so as you've been having dinner, every single Fellow is profiled in this magazine tonight. This is your keepsake for the evening. If you don't have one on your table, you can pick one up as you leave this evening. And finally, the amazing wine that you're drinking tonight, the champagne, all provided by the generosity of another one of our trustees, our Vice Chairman Dave House, and the Mountain Winery. So thank you, Dave, for that. Every great party runs on great wine, and Dave understands that better than probably anyone, so we're really grateful. Tonight is not just simply the annual awards, as you've heard. It's the 25th anniversary of the Fellows, and I'm going to give you about a 4-minute romp through 1987. For those of you, the non-engineers in the house, all four of you, you will understand that 25 years ago it was 1987. Which means that our first fellow was inducted, as Lynn said. Our first fellow was inducted in 1987, Grace Murray Hopper. Do we have Grace Murray Hopper up on the screen? We will have Grace. She will be here. There she is. Hello, Grace. What a fantastic picture. Isn't that a wonderful picture? Admiral Grace Murray Hopper, a woman definitely making it in a man's world, software engineer, amazing things that she did. In her career in computing, this is a picture of Grace after she finished that career and became the co-star of the famous TV series Mad Men. We're quite proud that Grace Hopper was the first fellow. I mentioned Ed Feigenbaum's observation earlier that we collect people, not just artifacts. But when you come to the museum, you are surrounded by artifacts. It's part and parcel of who we are. One of my favorite artifacts in the museum is 11 feet long. It weighs 9,000 pounds. It's got cast iron and steel parts. You think I'm talking about the Babbage engine. Nope, I'm talking about this. This is the cell phone we were all using in 1987. You remember? 25 years ago. There are things about 1987 that are utterly forgettable. For example, this is sort of what I looked like 25 years ago. So we won't go there. But if you do the math on 25 years ago, 25 years in nanoseconds is equivalent to 7.8892329 times 10 to the 17th power. How do I know that? I Googled it. And I found it on Wikipedia. Did I check the answer? No, I didn't check the answer, because we all know if it's on Wikipedia, it's absolutely 100% correct, of course. Now, in 1987, we didn't have Wikipedia, we didn't have Google. What did we do in a world where there was no search engine to gather all the world's information and organize it into funny cat photos and then make them universally available? So we not only have funny cat photos, but we have a whole new vocabulary thanks to the breakthroughs in computing. It's a vocabulary with words like this, sexting. Isn't that wonderful? You may not know this, but sexting is an official word. It's now in the Oxford Dictionary of the English Language. Sophie Wilson and Steve Ferber are here tonight from England, and I know that they absolutely love how the Yanks have been butchering the language for centuries now, and here's a great example of it. Other things about computing in 1987 really just seem hard to believe. For example, you remember how you used to have to control your PC by hitting this kind of convoluted set of keystrokes? Control. Do you remember? I'm sorry, what's that? I'm being told we still do this. One other startling fact, in 1987, Mark Zuckerberg was 2 years old. "25 years from now, it will be 2037. Now, I'm in the history museum business, which means I don't go near predicting the future. But I do wonder what we might be honoring in the future world of 2037. I'll tell you one thing I would like to see. I would like to see our fellows honored as the great innovators of the age that they are. I would like to see them really taken on by society as heroes of our age. They've changed the world. They brought untold human happiness. People who have that kind of effect get big commercial endorsements. They get big product endorsement deals. Where are those endorsement deals for our fellows? Don't you think Fernando Corbato is a much better candidate for the most interesting man in the world? One of the things we do, of course, is preserve the legacy and the actual words of people like Fernando and our fellows. And it's too bad that centuries ago, the technology that allows us to capture that and archive it here at the museum wasn't available. Just imagine how great it would be if you had walked in tonight and there was Da Vinci standing there in his rented tuxedo, glass of Merlot, handful of shrimp. And you walked up and you said, "So Leo, about that helicopter. Let's talk about that design you had. But you can't do that. But fortunately, Sophie and Steve and Ed and Corby are with us here tonight, and it's been an honor for me to get to know them better, to learn more about what they're all about, how they got where they are, the ideas they had, the mistakes they made, the successes they had, and ultimately the way they changed the world. So one last thing before we get on to honoring them. I'll bet if Leonardo da Vinci were here tonight, if he could have a pass from the afterlife and come back and be at this dinner, I think I know what he would say. I think he would say, "Can you please take this guy back? Every night he's in my room till 3 o'clock in the morning, a million ideas. I'm really tired of that." And so now we'll get on with the slightly more serious business after that look at 1987 of inducting our fellows for 2012. Our first fellow this evening led the development of time-sharing computer systems, which revolutionized how people interact with computers. The concept of a centralized computing facility with multiple remote users seems second nature to us now. Today we call one version of it cloud computing, and it's as pervasive in our lives today as electricity or water. The pioneer we honor tonight for originating time-sharing and multi-access computer systems is Corby, Fernando Corbato. This is a short video discussing his life, his work, and its impact.
When I started applying for graduate school, MIT was one of the choices, and I was accepted to MIT and came back to MIT in 1950 to begin my physics career. Right after getting my doctorate, I signed on as a research associate with this computation center.
The Computation Center at MIT, which serves more than 40 New England colleges and universities. The heart of the center is this IBM 7090 high-speed general-purpose digital computer. In addition to the routine work which takes place here, experimentation is underway to develop a new technique of computer usage called time sharing. At consoles like this one, located in laboratories and offices throughout New England, hundreds of people will one day be able to use tomorrow's computer simultaneously.
The demand on the center, on the computation center, was ever increasing and growing by leaps and bounds. We were suffering from being overloaded. This was happening all across the country, of course.
I'd like to have you meet Dr. Fernando J. Corbato, who's the Associate Director of this center. Dr. Corbato, maybe you can tell us about some of these problems to put this whole business in perspective for us.
Well, to do that, we have to go back about a decade.
In the 50s and 60s, the typical computer user would create a program, usually on punched cards, then submit it to a computer center to run on a large mainframe computer. It could take several hours or even days to get the results, and a single misplaced comma or other minor error would force the programmer to start over again.
So I came up with a notion of, couldn't we just do some sort of a demonstration system on the IBM 709, which would sort of exhibit the interactivity so that people had some notion of what we're talking about. It turned out that by being artful, we could sort of kludge IBM 709 into a time-sharing demonstration system.
Well, what we are trying to develop is a new scheme of using the computer, which we call time sharing, which consists of attaching a large number of consoles to the central computer. Now, this is the older batch processing technique.
One problem at a time.
One problem at a time. And it's pretty clumsy because of the weak interaction between the man and the machine. Now, what we're trying to do is superimpose on this a set of parallel consoles, which are not all near the computer, in fact. In fact, most of them are remote, and let the users use these with a reaction time of a few seconds rather than a few hours. Probably the most frightening part, though, is the fact that we've really made the computer extremely easy to use here. And so it's very clear that in the long run, we're going to increase the need for computer time by a large amount.
In 1963, Project Mac was launched at MIT with a $2 million grant from DARPA. The early Project Mac community, including Fernando Corbato, envisioned the creation of a computer utility which would be as reliable as electrical power.
But the key thing we did was we began to organize, and not when I say we, I mean all of Project Mac, began to think about a new machine. And the new machine was undesignated. And IBM had kind of assumed, because we were using their equipment, that it would probably be their brand of equipment. And they in turn had this 360 still under wraps, which they assumed would be an ideal candidate once they got a chance to show it to us. We elected to go work with GE to build Multics.
Multics was a groundbreaking operating system developed in 1964 for the GE 645 mainframe computer. It included a number of innovations, including time sharing and special security features. Later marketed by Honeywell, it had wide influence on how operating systems were designed from then on.
The key goal of Project Mac was to influence the industry. I would say in retrospect, we partly succeeded. We certainly got people to pay attention. We didn't get them to change their ways so quickly. But what was introduced was the notion of interactive computing. And that is today, nobody doubts that that's the way to use a computer today.
The 2012 Computer History Museum Fellow Award is presented to Fernando Corbato for his pioneering work in time-sharing and multi-access computer systems. Please join me in welcoming Corby to the stage to accept the award.
I was told to be brief, so I will be. Thank you very much for honoring me with this induction into the as a fellow of the Computer History Museum. I feel particularly fortunate to have had my professional career coincide with the tremendous evolution in the computer field, from punch cards machines and paper tapes all the way to our incredible number of devices. We now operate by spontaneous gestures, every kind of interaction you can imagine. I also would like to acknowledge that the person who first described time sharing and articulated it very eloquently was John McCarthy. Unfortunately, John died last year. But he was a great visionary and helped set the scene. I also want to acknowledge the fact that we built the system CTSS with a small team and Multics with a much larger team, with relatively young individuals, most of whom are still alive, who worked very diligently and very hard because they believed they were doing something important and they would make a difference. And I believe we did make a difference, and we're proud of that. So thank you again for this award, and thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Tonight's second honoree pioneered the field of expert systems, a branch of artificial intelligence. Expert systems seek to embed specific domain knowledge like medicine or art history into a computer. Expert systems usually outperform their human counterparts and have been used in applications as far-ranging as patient diagnosis and counterterrorism. Tonight we honor Ed Feigenbaum as a pioneer in this field. Here is Ed describing artificial intelligence, expert systems, and their impact.
I first got interested in computers as a kid. My father was an accountant, and he would do work at night, and he'd bring home large mechanical calculators of the kind that we have here in the Computer History Museum. Being a nerdy kid, I became a master of those calculators, and I loved to show them to my friends, and I showed off. I mean, those friends were great at football and tennis. I was great at calculators. But then I got to Carnegie Tech, what is now called Carnegie Mellon University, and during my undergraduate time there as an engineering student, I happened to come across one of the true geniuses of the 20th century, Herbert Simon, who was in the process of co-inventing what we now call artificial intelligence. I was taking a class as a senior from Herb Simon called Mathematical Models in the Social Sciences, and he walked in after the Christmas holiday and he said, over the Christmas break, Alan Newell and I invented a thinking machine. Well, that really blew our minds. You know, what do you mean by machine? What do you mean by a thinking machine? And then he handed us a manual of the IBM 701, and I took it home and read it from cover to cover. I remember staying up all night, and by morning I was born again. I was going to go into this field, and I got a job at IBM in the summer, learned how to program. I went back to Carnegie to be one of Herb Simon's graduate students, and then did my thesis in a part of artificial intelligence that we now call computer simulation of human cognitive processes, the psychology end of AI. Later on, I switched to the engineering side of AI.
Artificial intelligence programs were first made with the idea of doing symbolic computations that we call thinking. The intent was to build programs that reason about problems rather than calculate a solution.
We believed that thinking was no more than information processing in a complex program called the mind, which ran on a complex machine called the brain.
In 1965, Feigenbaum and Nobel laureate Joshua Lederberg started the Dendril project. Later joined by chemist Carl Djerassi and others, this project produced the world's first expert system. Expert systems were among the first successful forms of AI software. Unlike conventional programming, which follows the procedure of a developer, expert systems are designed to solve complex problems by reasoning about knowledge like an expert.
In every person, there is an expert. There is expertise in every person and in every field. The expert system builder wants to get that knowledge out, that expert knowledge out of the heads of the practitioners and model it as symbolic structures that we put in the memory of a computer and we turn over to the inference processes to solve problems. So an expert system is really a model of an expert's way of thinking and an expert's knowledge of a field. We have to realize that expert systems have always been used in the service of human activity in some area. And in fact, because of that, expert systems, almost by definition, came to be known as those AI programs that know how to explain themselves. That's extremely important because humans have to come to trust the line of reasoning of the expert system. You can't just have a black box announce, this is what you ought to do. This is what you ought to do because of this fact and this hypothesis and this reasoning step. You have to explain what it is you're doing, and that allows expert systems to be amplifiers of human thought. One of the greatest challenges of the next generation is how to enhance that amplification. Humans cooperating with machines. Think of it as co-evolution of people and computers and AI software.
The 2012 Computer History Museum Fellow Award is presented to Edward A. Feigenbaum for his pioneering work in artificial intelligence and expert systems. Please join me in welcoming Ed to the stage to accept the award.
I too was advised to be brief, but I may not. I want to first thank the Computer History Museum staff, especially Jennifer de la Cruz and John Plute for the great interview and the movie that they did. I didn't know what was in that movie until 2 days ago when I was here for a trustee meeting. But that was great because it, happily for me, it introduced the friends I wanted to tell you about. These friends and I took a long and thrilling journey together. I might even go over the top and call it an almost miraculous adventure. These friends and I get together from time to time to remember, to bring back the thrills of this journey. And the last time we got together was about 4 hours ago. These friends of mine live in a beautiful gated community in Mountain View, on the first floor here. So let me describe one of our reunions. So I popped through the short black tunnel into the bright lights and head right for my oldest friends, Marchant and Frieden. Now, sometimes to me on our journey, they seemed too fat, especially when I had to carry one of them to school to show my classmates. But several years later, after I met the big guys, Marchant and Frieden seemed too thin. But now, alas, once again, they seem too fat because of that. Then I pop across the path and visit my old college friend, Slide Rule. He hung around me all through engineering school, but I can't say I was happy around him. He measured things well, but he couldn't count. So he was always off a little high or a little low. You could never know exactly where you stood with him. If truth be told, I haven't seen much of him since college, except at these reunions of ours. But I've got to be moving along fast, so I race over to my first really great friend with the funny name of Johnniac. Wow. Johnniac could do 10,000 times more than Marchant and Frieden, but he could also prove theorems in propositional logic. He even proved one theorem far better than Whitehead and Russell had done, and got a letter of acknowledgement and respect from Mr. Bertrand Russell. Really? So hustling on, I visit the communal dwelling of my friends in artificial intelligence. They all live inside a 9-minute movie. Oh, there goes Alan Turing. Unfortunately, he was never a friend of mine, but I once wrote a program for his computer, the Pilot Ace. Here comes Herb Simon and Alan Newell. You've seen them earlier. They co-invented AI and list processing languages, for which they won the Turing Award. Herb Simon, my mentor, collaborator, and friend, was a true genius. The economists knew this too. They awarded him the Nobel Prize in Economics for the invention of behavioral economics. I want to say a word about these geniuses. I once told an audience of high school students heading for college to pick a college with a lot of really smart faculty. And once there, search hard among those faculty to find a genius to work with. You won't have learned what it means to think clearly and deeply until you've learned it from one of these. Or more than one. Here comes Joshua Lederberg and Carl Djerassi. I was really lucky, or maybe talented, in finding geniuses to collaborate with. Lederberg, when he won the Nobel Prize in Medicine, was the youngest ever to win that prize. And he once described Carl Djerassi to me as a phenomenon of nature. Their interest in mine and Bruce Buchanan's in building computer models of how they had interest in building computer models of how scientists thought. Out of that came the first expert system, one modeled on how Djerassi and his postdocs thought about one area of physical chemistry. But I have to move along, and so I quickly say hello to older colleagues, former students, and younger colleagues, and then dash down the path through the future and into the present. I reflect on how marvelous this journey has been. Maybe this has been the best time to be alive ever. Al Newell once described our amazing journey among the exponentials as a trip through fairyland. Whatever you want, just wait a little bit and you'll get it. Now, maybe it's not fairyland, but Disneyland. You all remember Disney's theme song. Unfortunately, I would be embarrassed to sing it to you, but I'll tell you what it is and I'll recast it. When you wish upon a star, we'll tell Moore's Law where you are. So with that thought, I dash up the stairs to the second floor wall, where I look knowingly, mostly fondly, and in some awe at the 57 fellows on the wall, and feel deeply grateful to the Computer History Museum for having elected me to join their elite club. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. Be careful going down the stairs. In the world today, there are billions more computer processors using the ARM architecture than there are human beings on the planet. The chips based on the original design by Steve Ferber and Sophie Wilson appear in thousands of different products, especially in today's mobile technology. I was remarking to someone earlier this evening that these processors run almost everything mobile, and someone said back to me, well, that means they run almost everything. And that's not far from true. The secret to the architecture is high performance and ultra-low power use. ARM processors powered the BBC microcomputer, which Sophie and Steve also designed, and which introduced personal computing to the United Kingdom. Millions of British households were transformed by the fact that the BBC Micro existed, and 8 out of every 10 British schools had a BBC Micro at its height. Here are Steve and Sophie describing the processor, the BBC Micro, and the revolution they brought.
But what is information technology? All it really means is the world of computers. But why have they suddenly become so important? And what should we, as non-computer experts, know about them? Well, that's exactly what I shall be finding out during this series. One thing I know already, don't expect the computer revolution to happen tomorrow. It's happening now.
So I got involved in the embryonic acorn, basically as a side activity. I was doing it evenings and weekends.
I went to work full-time for Acorn, £1,200 a year, and if I built a computer out of acorn parts, I could keep it.
Chris Curry had heard that the BBC was looking for a machine to support a series of TV programmes.
They'd been working with a company called New Brain to design something that they could write a TV series around for educating the populace in microcomputers. Chris Curry got wind of the fact that they weren't getting on very well with New Brain for their prototype and said, well, why don't you come and see the prototype we're making? Glossing over the fact that we hadn't made a prototype.
Herman rang Sophie at the weekend and said the BBC are coming on Friday. You think we can show them a prototype?
Well, that's crazy. We can't possibly build the machine that we've been discussing for ages by Friday. There's so much work to do.
And then Herman rang me and said, the BBC are coming on Friday. Sophie thinks we can show them a prototype. And I said, well, if Sophie thinks it's worth a go, I'm prepared to have a go. And then he phoned Sophie back.
He said to me, but Steve's agreed that we can do it. Oh, well, if Steve thinks we can do it, perhaps we can.
We ended up working day and night that week to get the prototype going for BBC on Friday.
By the time Herman and Chris let the people into the lab to see the prototype, there it was, a high-resolution screen generated by the CRT controller on a BBC computer.
And the end result was Acorn got the contract for the BBC Micro, and that happened around Easter 1981.
Well, I did program those early valve machines, which had several interesting characteristics. First, they were extremely expensive to buy. They were horrendously expensive to run. You needed a resident maintenance engineer just to keep the things going. And they were very slow.
Not long after the success of the Acorn's BBC Micro, the Acorn team realized they needed to design their own microprocessor in order to compete with new computers arriving on the market.
We particularly felt we needed a better processor in order to compete with what was just beginning to be a flood of IBM PC compatibles.
To us as a team at the time, the idea of building our own microprocessor didn't seem a terribly likely solution to our problem.
At that stage, saw the very first publications of RISC chips.
Sophie started doodling with these ideas and producing draft instruction sets.
Steve started researching how you made these things work.
We expected at any point to discover why designing our own microprocessor was a bad idea. And really the history of the project is that that point never arrived.
We sent ARM off to VLSI Technology to be fabricated. It came back on the 26th of April 1985. We plugged it into the ready and waiting second processor board. It ran ARM BBC Basic. We said print pie and cracked open the bottles of champagne.
After only 18 months from when we seriously started on the project to when we had working silicon,
this new microchip was the first of the ARM generation of processors designed in the early 1980s. With their ultra-low power needs, high performance, and versatility, they are used in many products you might recognize.
The 2012 Computer History Museum Fellow Award is presented to Steve Ferber and Sophie Wilson for their work on the BBC Micro and their design of the ARM processor architecture. Please join me in welcoming Steve and Sophie to the stage to accept the award.
I will keep it brief. Oh, I've been told to stand a lot closer. Thank you to the Computer History Museum for honouring me in inviting me to be a fellow of the CHM. It is a privilege to join such a distinguished set of computing pioneers. I'd like to thank, well, everyone who thought I could do something when I wasn't really sure I could do it myself. But particular thanks to Hermann Hauser and everyone on the ARM project. Their belief was amazing. And this being an award ceremony, mock tear, and I'd like to thank my parents for bringing me up to make things. I hope the next 25 years of the Computer History Museum is just as wonderful as the last 25 years. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honour to be standing here to receive this award from the Computer History Museum. And the 57 names on the board outside stand as some sort of pinnacles of the achievements of the industry, but I'm a great believer that engineering is fundamentally a team sport. And Sophie and I stand here as the tip of an iceberg, and we wouldn't be here without a great deal of support from a very large number of people. And I'm particularly pleased that several of those have been here tonight. In fact, several are actually reaching into their pockets and sponsoring it. Sophie has already mentioned Hermann Hauser, who's here with Pamela, and also Jim Mitchell, who was our immediate manager at the time that we did the ARM development. It's actually staggering when you look back to think about the confidence that those guys had in Sophie and me, who'd never designed any kind of microprocessor before. And it was a very odd thing for a company of Acorn's size to do at that time. Then, of course, there was the involvement of Apple in the formation of ARM as a separate company. And again, Larry Tesler and Alan Baum are here representing the Apple team. And you may not realize this, but the Apple Newton is a product which came and went, probably told Apple quite a lot about how to design that sort of product, but fundamentally established the ARM. ARM would not be here without Apple's support in the early 1990s. And then, of course, last but not least, there's the company ARM Limited itself, represented here tonight by Simon, Dipesh, and Eric on my table. I don't know if there are others elsewhere in the room. And ARM now employs 2,200 people who, as far as I can tell, work tirelessly to maintain my reputation. But clearly, a great deal of the credit for the success today, the 30 billion ARM processors out there, is owed to those 2,200 people. We just sowed the seeds quite a long time ago. So thank you very much.
Well said. Thanks very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give one more round of applause to the Fellows Class of 2012. That is the end of the formal part of the evening, but the evening continues. The party goes on downstairs. You'll find coffee and dessert and drinks, and if you're so inclined, cordials and cigars in the tent out front. So please stay, enjoy yourselves, mingle, say hello to the fellows and congratulate them, and continue to have a very good time. Thank you.